$1.05 trillion. U.S. national defense spending for fiscal year 2026, up 17% in a single year. The first country in human history to cross $1 trillion in military spending. Not a proposal, enacted, funded. Let that land. $1 trillion. Every carrier strike group, every satellite, every base on every continent. One budget line, one country. And no nation on earth has ever done this before. Global defense spending in 2025 hit $2.63 trillion, according to the International Institute for Strategic Studies. The United States alone accounts for 38% of every defense dollar spent on Earth. One country, 38% of the entire planet. If you want to see the real numbers behind the headlines, subscribe to the Data Desk and hit the bell so you never miss a breakdown. China spends $225 billion. Russia, $109 billion. NATO Europe, 31 countries combined, $574 billion. America outspends NATO Europe by $431 billion alone. The Global Firepower Index ranked the United States number 1 of 145 countries in 2026. That ranking has held for over a decade. The gap between first and second is not a ranking, it is a structural divide. This is not a story about one budget line. It is a story about a deliberate decision, backed by data, to reestablish hard power as the foundation of American foreign policy. And the decision came with a price tag, $1 trillion. The shift did not happen overnight. In 2014, NATO was in crisis. Russia had moved on Crimea. European allies were spending less than ever. The 2% GDP target was being ignored by nearly every member. Only 3 allies were meeting it. 3 out of 28. 3 countries meeting their own commitment. The rest free riding on American spending and American guarantees. For a decade, the pressure built. For a decade, the numbers barely moved. Then something changed. The change showed up in data before it showed up in speeches. By 2025, per NATO's Secretary General Annual Report, published March 26, 2026, every single ally, all 32, met or exceeded the 2% GDP target. Every one. For the first time since NATO was founded in 1949, 76 years to get there. $1.05 trillion for America, $574 billion for all of NATO Europe, $225 billion for China, $109 billion for Russia. This is the verified global balance of military power in 2026. The numbers do not argue. They simply state what is true. 32 out of 32. That did not happen by accident. America made clear the terms were changing. Pay your share, or the guarantee weakens. The message landed. European allies and Canada increased defense spending by 19.6% in 2025, the second consecutive year at that rate, per NATO and Reuters, March 26, 2026. The acceleration is real and documented. But what does $1 trillion actually buy? What does it deploy, deter, and project? And what does the adversary data say in response? That breakdown is next. $1 trillion is a number, but a budget means nothing until you see what it fields. So let us look at what $1 trillion actually buys in 2026. Start with air power. The United States operates 13,032 military aircraft, according to Global Firepower and Visual Capitalist, April 7, 2026. Russia operates 4,237, China 3,529. America has more military aircraft than the next 3 countries combined. That is not a ranking, that is a category of its own. 13,032 for America, 4,237 for Russia, 3,529 for China. The United States leads the next 3 nations combined. Air dominance in 2026 is not a debate. It is a documented fact. Now the Navy. 11 aircraft carrier strike groups. America operates more than the rest of the world combined. Impressed, no other nation fields more than 2. China fields 2. Russia's single carrier has spent most of the last 4 years in dry dock. 11 deployable American strike groups, simultaneously, globally. Each carrier is a mobile airbase, capable of striking targets over 500 miles inland. A command platform, a deterrent signal, 11 of them, deployable, right now. Submarines, 64, every one nuclear-powered, per Global Firepower 2026. China operates 61, but only 12 are nuclear. Russia operates 65, but aging infrastructure has kept many non-deployable. The undersea advantage is not just numbers, it is readiness. The FY 2026 procurement numbers confirm the trajectory. $7.6 billion for 47 F-35 fighters, $1.9 billion for the B-21 Raider, $27.2 billion for 17 new Navy ships. One budget year, one country. $3.2 billion into hypersonic weapons development, per Congressional Research Service, February 26, 2026. Total Pentagon procurement, $205 billion, 18% above the prior year. Every platform, every domain, funded and accelerating. 13,000 aircraft, 11 carrier groups, 64 nuclear submarines, $3.2 billion in hypersonics, $27.2 billion in new ships, verified, enacted, funded. This is the force structure $1 trillion builds. 750 bases across more than 80 countries. 221,000 personnel stationed abroad as of December 2025, per USA Facts. China has 4 confirmed overseas bases. Russia a handful of aging installations. America operates 750. The reach gap is not measured in bases. It is measured in response time. No adversary needs an analyst to explain 750 bases and $1 trillion. They read the procurement contracts, and they adjust their calculations accordingly. The hardware is half the story. The other half is what the adversary ledger actually shows. Because Beijing and Moscow are not standing still. They are spending, they are building, and the gap between what they claim and what the verified data shows, that is the story next. The adversary ledger. The mainstream narrative frames China and Russia as rising powers closing the gap on America. The data tells a different story. Let us run the numbers. China's official 2026 defense budget, $277 billion, a 7% increase. Beijing calls it modest, but the Pentagon does not believe it. China declares $277 billion. The Pentagon estimates the real figure is between $388 and $526 billion, a gap of over $200 billion between what Beijing announces and what American intelligence assesses. That is not an accounting error. It is deliberate concealment. The CSIS China Power Project confirms Chinese figures exclude research and development, foreign arms purchases, and paramilitary force funding. Even at the Pentagon's low estimate, America still outspends China by 2.7 times. At the high estimate, America still leads by double. The gap does not close, it widens. China's budget also accelerates from a position of internal weakness. The PLA purged multiple senior generals in the last 18 months for corruption, raising questions about whether allocated funds reach operational units or disappear into procurement fraud. Now Russia. Moscow's 2026 federal budget allocates 38% of all government spending to defense and domestic security, per the Moscow Times, October 2025. 38% of the entire federal budget. That is not a rising power. That is an economy being consumed by its own military machine. The IMF cut Russia's 2026 growth forecast to 0.8% in January 2026. Inflation above 9%. Interest rates above 20%. FDD analysts documented Russian businesses adopting what they called tactical poverty measures, cutting all investment just to survive the financial pressure. Here is the contrast the headlines are missing. America spends $1 trillion from a $30.5 trillion economy, 3.4% of GDP. Russia spends an estimated 9% or more of GDP and is growing at 0.8%. One country is spending from strength, the other is spending toward collapse. America at 3.4% of GDP, Russia at 9% or more. One economy expanding, one mortgaging its future. The numbers do not require interpretation. They simply show two countries on opposite trajectories and which direction each is heading. China faces a different constraint. Youth unemployment above 18% in mid-2025. Property crisis. Consumer confidence at decade lows. Beijing is spending more on defense precisely as the economic engine funding it begins to slow. America's $1 trillion posture is not built on a strained economy. It is built on $30.5 trillion in GDP, 4.4% real growth in Q3 2025, and $1.595 trillion in new manufacturing investment running in parallel. The foundation is not cracking, it is expanding. Two adversaries, both spending more, both facing structural headwinds their state media will not cover, both watching an American defense budget that crossed a threshold neither can match. What does this mean for the global order, and what comes next? That verdict is final. Here is what the full picture shows. $1 trillion from America, a 19.6% surge from NATO allies, 32 out of 32 meeting their commitment for the first time in 76 years. And on the other side, adversaries spending from weakening economies toward a gap they cannot close. This is not a race America is entering. It is a race America is already winning. NATO total, $1.59 trillion. America alone, $1.05 trillion. China estimated up to $526 billion. Russia, $109 billion. One alliance, one dominant partner, two adversaries that cannot close the gap. The balance is verified. The numbers do not require a narrator. They speak for themselves. The $1 trillion threshold is not just a budget line. It is a signal. To every ally, America is committed. To every adversary, the cost of miscalculation has risen. To every defense planner in Beijing and Moscow, the trajectory is moving against them, not toward them. The Hague Summit target, 3.5% of GDP, represents the next inflection point. If allies reach that threshold, combined NATO spending crosses $2 trillion annually, from an alliance already at $1.59 trillion. The signal compounds. And here is what the critics miss. They frame this spending as a burden. The data does not support that. 3.4% of a $30.5 trillion economy. The Soviet Union spent 15 to 17% of GNP at peak and collapsed under that weight. Russia is at 9% and slowing. America is at 3.4% and growing. The comparison ends the argument. $1 trillion is also economic output. 47 F-35s built in Fort Worth. 17 Navy ships built in American shipyards. The B-21 Raider built in Palmdale. $1 trillion flowing through American workers, American factories, American supply chains. And it is happening alongside, not instead of, economic growth. $1.595 trillion in private manufacturing investment. $1.05 trillion in defense. The economy is not choosing between guns and growth. The data shows it is doing both simultaneously. $600 billion in 2014, $738 in 2020, $886 in 2024, 1.05 trillion in 2026. Not a spike, a sustained compounding climb built on a foundation no adversary can replicate on its current economic trajectory. Here is the verdict. America crossed 1 trillion in defense spending, the first country in history. From a position of strength, not strain. Allies surging alongside it, adversaries spending from weakness. The gap is not closing, it is widening. 1.05 trillion. 38% of all defense spending on Earth. 145 countries ranked. America is number 1. The Firepower Index confirmed it. The NATO data confirmed it. The adversary budgets proved it by contrast. Read the data. See the world differently. What story should we break down next? Drop it in the comments, and we will see you in the next data file.